Let's just talk first about what the Taoiseach Varadkar said today, and that he's ruled out any suggestion of pre-registration in order for people and goods going through the Irish border from the Republic of Ireland to Northern Ireland under this smart border scheme. Do you think that's a wasted opportunity, or he's closed down a possible avenue which could have been successful?
Well, look, I am a member of the Democratic Unionist Party, a unionist from Northern Ireland. I live 15 minutes from the border with the Irish Republic. I don't want to see a hard border. I want things for us to be able to facilitate the flow of goods and people across that border. That is in all of our interests, in good neighbourliness, but also in terms of work, in terms of travel, etc., etc. I think that what we need to do is bring a little bit of reality into the border issue. For example, the Taoiseach today has been talking about no pre-registration. However, the preservation of the common travel area automatically means that people within the British Isles as a whole will have the right to travel and work in either of the jurisdictions. So, you know, the idea that there should be pre-registration to travel is not one that will actually be, in reality, will ever come to pass. In terms of goods, what we've got to do is recognise that Northern Ireland, as part of the United Kingdom, will leave the customs union and the single market with the rest of the United Kingdom. And therefore we've got to find a way then of ensuring through cooperation, through whether we call it smart borders or whatever infrastructure or whatever way we want to do that, to ensure that there is no infrastructure at the border and that we have that free flow of goods. Now what the Taoiseach should do is what his predecessor Enda Kenny was doing: sit down and work it out. Whereas when Leo Varadkar came into office, he stopped all the good work that Enda Kenny had been doing on these issues and the cooperation, and he now only seeks a political solution. But there will have to be practical solutions to the border as well.
I mean, he obviously said, and indeed the European Union has said, the UK cannot negotiate with Ireland as one member state. It must negotiate through the European Union, Ireland being one of the 27. I mean, do you think that in itself is a sustainable position, or is it a case of it's something the UK and Ireland need to sort out for themselves?
I think eventually it's something that they will sort out. It is in our mutual benefit to actually sort this matter out. And, you know, we can all talk, we don't want to go back to the borders of the past, etc. Remember, the borders of the past were there to prevent terrorism. They were more interested in catching those who were carrying Semtex across the border than those who were actually trying to get some milk powder across the border. So, you know, we don't want to go back. No one wants to go back. We want friendly, good relationship with our nearest nature. It's in our mutual benefit to have that, and we will have to have the practical solutions in coming together. And in tying himself to the EU 27, I believe, as one of our MPs last week put it, that the Taoiseach is actually playing Russian roulette with his own economy. 52% of Irish beef will find its market in a supermarket in Birmingham, Manchester, London, Leeds or wherever.
Just picking up on the whole idea of the border, and you mentioned it there, you know, that the reason for the border historically was in order to stop, you know, some terrorism activity. In terms of your priorities and in the DUP's priorities, when we're talking about a border here, is there any acceptance that some kind of border, whether it be a smart border, where it be some kind of very light border, would in an acceptable, that would be acceptable for the DUP, that something there would be okay, some kind of resolution in terms of having some mechanism for registration?
We will have to come to a resolution on the border. That's absolutely apparent.
Would the DUP be happy with some border as opposed to no border at all?
No, we want to maintain that easy, frictionless flow of goods and people and across the border. But remember, some of the context for the border in Northern Ireland will be pretty much the same context for the border between Dover and Calais, for example. Some of the context for the cross-border transport It will be exactly the same. I often say to people that the same rules that will govern the enterprise train that runs between Dublin and Belfast will be the exact same rules that govern the train that goes between London and Brussels.
What do you make of Taoiseach Varadkar's comments, particularly in relation to David Davis and Boris Johnson today, which is that they need to see with your own eyes what the border actually would look like? Go over to Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland, that border, and go and see what the consequences have been. Because the implication there is that neither of them have really, particularly in the context of Boris Johnson's comments about the border and having some kind of Canada possibility, and where there are some customs posts on that border between Canada and the US, that they don't really know what they're talking about. They haven't actually given it much thought. Do you have any sympathy with that?
Can I just broaden this out a little bit? I'm here in the European Parliament. And for the past year, I have met more experts on the Northern Ireland border. I have met more experts on the Belfast Agreement that I ever knew existed ever before in the European Parliament. It's easy to fire cheap shots like the Taoiseach was doing today. But my home is 15 minutes from the border. It's not an abstract to me. It is the place I call home. And I am saying, as a unionist from part of the United Kingdom that is Northern Ireland, that I absolutely do not want a hard border, but I absolutely do not want a border that separates Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom.
And so would that then be that you would accept a soft border, but a border nonetheless between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, if it guaranteed no border in the Irish Sea?
Let's be a little bit real. These are two separate jurisdictions on the island of Ireland. We already have a currency border, so we have the euro and the pound sterling. We have different tax regimes, we have different corporation tax regimes, we have different social security systems. There are already major differences. What I'm saying positively is that I want to continue the cooperation, the good neighbourliness, the good relations that we have, and I want to ensure that those small businesses that operate along the border can continue to do so. Now, can I just let me finish. This is important. This is very important. In the government paper of last August, one of the ways that they actually said that they might look at to actually ensure that small businesses, and I'm talking of micro businesses, businesses who employ maybe 10 people or less, that they could continue to operate across the border, was to actually consider that as local trade. If we did that in conjunction with the European Union, I put this point to Mr. Barnier last week, if we did that in conjunction with the European Union and the government in Dublin, that would mean that 80% of that trade would continue unabated and unaffected. And that would equate to 0.01% of the European Union's trade.
I just want to go back to something you said there, because everything you said there in terms of there's already some kind of difference between the currencies, for example. There's already certain things. What you also seem to be saying is, and therefore it wouldn't necessarily be such a big deal if there was some form of border established.
I think you're trying to put words in my mouth, and I'm not going to allow you. I'm absolutely not going to allow you to do that. Our position is that we do not want to see a hard border. I'm quoting to you the reality of the situation as it is now. We do not want to see a hard border. We want our firms, our businesses to be able to trade. We want our families to be able to visit their neighbours and their relations either across that border. The agreement around the common travel area will wipe away all of that. There will be no border for people, and now we need to find a solution to the border for goods. That solution, though, cannot be to the detriment of our relationship, constitutionally or economically, with the rest of the United Kingdom, which is our most important market by far.
Just one more thing. What's your reaction when you hear a former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, get up, and not any Prime Minister, the Prime Minister who helped forge the Good Friday Agreement, get up and say on BBC Radio 4, it's disappointing and sickening, I'm not saying this verbatim, that people should really be prepared to sacrifice peace in Northern Ireland on the altar of Brexit. Now, this is obviously in the context of the Good Friday Agreement. What's just your response when you hear that being put by the former Prime Minister of the country who helped broker that agreement in itself?
I always get very nervous when I hear John Major and Tony Blair interfere in the democratic process in the way that they're doing, in a I know better sort of way. In the United Kingdom, in a democratic referendum, 52% of the people voted to leave the European Union. What we need to do, instead of going on about Remain, we need to implement the result of the referendum. And that's absolutely the most important thing. And I can tell you that people in Northern Ireland object to people flying in or making announcements on their behalf when they have little to no knowledge of the current day-to-day life in Northern Ireland. And I mean, they did it during the referendum campaign. They actually hardened opinion in a pro-Brexit way. I think John Major and Tony Blair would be well advised to talk about what they know and not what they think the current situation in Northern Ireland is.
And so obviously what he's, particularly Tony Blair, was suggesting is that somehow Brexit could either be a cause of further violence or return to violence, or a downfall of the Good Friday Agreement. You don't see that as any kind of risk?
It's utterly appalling to actually say that. I mean, peace in Northern Ireland belongs to the people of Northern Ireland. It belongs to those who sacrificed either in defeating a terrorist campaign, and it belongs to those in communities who day by day are building the peace in Northern Ireland. And for Tony Blair to somehow suggest that Brexit damages that good work and that hard-fought progress, I think is utterly appalling, totally out of touch, and actually galling to those who lost their lives, to the victims who live with the impact of violence on their lives, and to those very, very sound and good people who are now building the peace in Northern Ireland. Who is going to do this violence? It certainly isn't the people of Northern Ireland, and actually the security assessment for Northern Ireland has improved.
Now, we are just part of the way through these negotiations. The reports coming through is that the Irish border is going to remain the serious sticking point in terms of the negotiations, particularly over the customs union, customs arrangement, alignment, managed, moving away from Brexit in terms of Brexit. What does Theresa May need to do in terms of the DUP priorities in the next few months? I mean, and do you maintain that confidence in Theresa May delivering it?
Theresa May has actually aligned herself with the people of Northern Ireland and said, first of all, in terms of the draft legal text that Michel Barnier produced a couple of weeks ago, in saying that no British Prime Minister could actually ever agree to such a text. And in fact, actually, Michel Barnier conducted some sort of feat. He actually united British political opinion because, of course, the Labour Party said that no British Prime Minister could agree to this kind of text.
There's still no resolution, though. It's still widely reported that there's been no progression in terms of the Irish border issue. So what does Theresa May, does she need to stay firm? Does she need to be more creative? What's the DUP's thinking?
Well, again, as I've said to you, we are up for a pragmatic solution to the border. We are absolutely not up for anything that would divide us from our main market, which is Great Britain, or constitutionally impact on the integrity of Northern Ireland. I think the Prime Minister has said exactly that as well. She has said that there should be no internal borders within the United Kingdom. Now, what we actually need the European Union to do is start to negotiate with a realistic view as to what we actually can do. And some of that will be a pragmatic, practical solution, and others will be, sort of trying to take us forward from where we are now. Some of it will apply to, for example, the United Kingdom as a whole. For example, I often quote the example of the cross-border train service. It is exactly the same as the London to Brussels train service. So those kind of things like mutual recognition of qualifications to drive a train on either side of those borders are exactly the same things. So we must stop talking about Northern Ireland in a micro context, start looking at it within the United Kingdom context as well, but also I mean, we said it to Michel Barnier, we've said it quite clearly, we are up for practical solutions to the border. What we will not have is something that questions the constitutional integrity of Northern Ireland or separates us from our main market.
Diane Dodds, thank you very much.
Thank you.